Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about positive vibes on the show, and I've got a very special guest with me here. He has worked for numerous companies over the years, including AWA as well as the WWE. Pleased to welcome the one, the only Tom Stone to the show. Welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So tell me about your childhood. Where are you from?
I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My childhood was pretty normal. I went through, in high school, my dad became the ring announcer in Milwaukee. And I started getting tickets and started going to the matches. And that's when I started learning about wrestling.
Hmm.
And then I became the timekeeper. And soon after that, I started wrestling.
Okay, so you were a fan from childhood, getting to go to all the shows.
I was a fan in starting like a junior year in high school. I never cared about wrestling before that.
Okay. All
And
right.
through my dad, I got to meet Heenan and Bockwinkel and Stevens, and I became friends with Nick and Ray.
So,
And
so you,
it looked neat with them flying into Milwaukee. And I thought, boy, that looks like a neat profession. I didn't realize that you were going to put 100,000 miles in your car every year.
and it's just so fascinating to watch these, men and women like put their bodies on the line for our entertainment, and it's really an art form. It really is.
It was more of an art form back in my day because we didn't pre-plan the whole match in the dressing room like they do now. We actually went in the ring and tried to figure out what the people wanted to see and tried to give them what they wanted and get the crowd reaction. Today they figure it all out in the dressing room whether the crowd reacts or not. So it's a completely different business today.
Well, it always evolves and it changes over time. And back then, you didn't have social media, you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have, access to the internet. And it was just, like you said, it was a different time. Everything was, you know, not at your fingertips. It was you had to go see the show, find out from the newspapers who won or who lost, and, just, go to the next show if you
Well,
were
we
interested.
we didn't even have GPS to get to the towns. Many times when I worked in Mid South for Bill Watts, I knew they were in Greenville, Mississippi. I didn't know what building they were at. I had to go find a poster and find the building on my own.
Hmm.
Now you got GPS, you put in Greenville Auditorium and you're right there. That wasn't true back in 1980.
So you got to work in a variety of different roles. Any fun stories you want to share about, being a timekeeper, or did you get to referee as well, or was it
Yeah, I
just
refereed a little bit. The only fun thing, well, I don't know if it was fun for the guys. Bockwinkel and Billy Robinson were doing a 60-minute draw, and I forgot to start the clock. I made him do a 80-minute draw. Uh, that was, and then I guess one night in Green Bay, I was keeping time, and Wahoo was wrestling Billy Graham, and they were doing a strap match, and it was one of the bloodiest affairs I'd ever seen. My white leather jacket from high school was bright red. I mean, completely soaked through.
it's got to be, just, unbelievable, getting that, but at the same time, it's like you remember that though. Like it's almost like a souvenir in some ways, because
And then, like refereeing, I think the highlight was Ken Mantell against Paul Orndorff. I refereed it. They did it in three towns. They did it in Shreveport, Jackson, Mississippi, and New Orleans. I had the New Orleans and Jackson, and it was by far the best pop I've ever heard from a wrestling crowd.
Hmm.
When he put the hair cream on Mantel's head, I mean, the place just literally exploded. It was unbelievable. Now, the funny thing is, they taped the one in Shreveport. So when that one got shown around the horn, the people in New Orleans and Jackson saw a different referee reffing their match. I don't know if any of them ever caught it, but
And so your journey as a wrestler, when did that actually start?
well, when I was in college, I was a security guard and I met Frank Hill, who became Jules Strongbow. He was driving a company mail van. So we would sit and talk. And once he got into it, he helped get me into it. In fact, he got my first booking, which was in St. Louis at the Chase Hotel.
Were you at the time working for Sam Mushnick? Mm,
Yes.
okay. What was it like working under him?
You didn't see him much except for the house shows. He wasn't at TV. Pat O'Connor ran the TV. And
And
I can tell you, as a new kid going in there, it was a little unnerving. My first match was against Dan Diamond and Gary Young, and they beat the ring. There was as hard as the asphalt and the concrete outside in the street. It was the hardest ring. And after they beat the living hell out of me, I came upstairs wanting to go home. And Pat O'Connor said, Steve, my real name's Steve. He says, you're with Brody on the next taping. So I wanted to introduce myself to Bruiser Brody. And the first thing he said to me was, let me thank you now, kid, in case I'm not able to later. Well, two little guys just beat the hell out of me. And now I got Bruiser Brody. Frank was fine. We became friends. I wrestled him 4 or 5 times.
that's another man that we just lost. Was a true legend. Um, he's still missed to this day. Yeah, I mean, St. Louis was still one of the greatest wrestling towns of all time, still is. Wrestling at the Chase was just so legendary. You spent some time working for the AWA as well
I
as the
spent a lot of
W.
time working for Vern. And then I went and worked for Kansas City. And I worked for Bill Watts. And then I came back and took a year off. And then I started working for AWA again. And then Terry Garvin was in the office in New York and he was booking the TV talent. And I knew him from Kansas City. So he had me start booking guys into New York for TV. And that was a pretty good payday. They took care of me real well.
Well, you work for so many different promotions and different towns. What were some of like your favorite stops to go to, when traveling?
No, it's funny. We when we traveled, we went to the town and wrestled and left. I mean, towns that were my favorite, they come down. I mean, Chicago was fun just because the crowd. We were working at the amphitheater, and during the first match, the crowd started chanting, "We want blood, we want blood," and so they were a really wild crowd. Uh, Other than that, they were kind of all the same. I mean, once you were in the ring, they were kind of all the same.
You had mentioned Vern Gagne. What was it like working with him?
It was fine. He treated me okay. I had him in my first match ever in the AWA was the only time him and Greg ever teamed up on TV.
Hmm.
And it was me and Herman Schaefer. So I had that. And then I wrestled Vern like my third time up in Minneapolis. But he was fine. They booked me a lot. I got a lot of house shows. Got no complaints with Greg or Vern.
And you'd mentioned, getting the job with WWE during your time there. Did you have a fun time there as well?
Yeah, they were for a while. They were flying us all over the country. Uh, but again, one town was the same as the next, really. The difference then was it was our job to make the crowd to find out what the crowd wanted and to give it to them. And if you did that, it was always fun.
The crowds that it's the lifeblood of the
But
show.
but now the guys don't care. They're going to do their 10 things that they have planned, whether the crowd likes it or not. And that's why I don't even understand why you would want to go out and put your body to that if there's no artistry in it. I mean, now you have to be a gymnast basically, and I don't. That's to me that's not wrestling.
Now, training, I'm sure for you was different, of course, as it is, compared to nowadays. What was your experience like learning how to wrestle?
Well, again, I did it with Frank Hill, and we would do it at a on a boxing ring in Milwaukee. There was a guy who Al Moreland ran boxing, and he'd let us have the ring a couple nights a week after 7 o'clock, and we'd go down there. And then I went down to Luke Klein's wrestling school, who was Red Bastien's half brother in Allen Park, Michigan. And I was there like 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks, every time they'd go on the road and he'd come back and he'd show me a headlock. And then they'd go on the road and he'd come back, he'd show me a headlock. After 3 weeks, I went home. And I really just learned it from doing it.
It's repetition.
Well, you get in a situation where when I went to Kansas City, they said, "You're a heel, you lead the match." So it was my job to be, and ever since then, that's all I've known. So if I would work with Nick Bockwinkel, and if he was a babyface, I was going to lead. Uh, and I learned that they wanted you to. I mean, I worked with Rashke one night, and I was going to give him because he was the old timer. I was going to let him lead, even though he was a babyface, and he was letting me lead. Nobody led. It was the worst match of my professional career.
Wow.
It was terrible.
Was there anything that you wish you could have done better?
Yeah, I should have led. He was waiting for me to lead, and I was waiting for him to lead. Nobody led. So we had two people dancing and no one leading. It was what a terrible match. And Jim and I rode to the show together, so it was terrible.
Did you two wrestle again after that?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure we did.
Yeah, I mean, you've had, the opportunity to work against so many different wrestlers over the course of your career. Who have been some of your favorite opponents to work with?
I think, well, I spent a month in Louisiana wrestling Jake Roberts almost every night. And this is before he was Jake the Snake, but he was fun. Uh, in the AWA, I think I wrestled everyone when they came in. I mean, I wrestled Rick Martel and Saito when they first came in, and Dr. Death. But I think my favorite match was we had a sold out show in Minneapolis with closed circuit television going next door, and I had Pat Patterson. And Pat was a trip. We were getting the instructions, and now everyone knows Pat was gay. And Pat looked at me and said, "Listen, kid, just remember," and this is a wrestling term, but I guess it was also a gay term. He said, "Just remember, if I get behind you, you're fucked." And then when I made my big comeback, he laid on the mat going, "Kiss me on the lips, Mary, kiss me on the lips." Uh, but Pat was one of my heroes, so I have to say that was a thrill.
How long did you wrestle over when did you retire?
Somewhere in the mid 90s. I mean, I quit watching it probably 92 when my kid turned 6 because he started playing some baseball. And I still wrestled probably for 3 or 4 years when they called me, but I wasn't actively seeking it out. And I'd go to the show, and I know one night I had Terry Taylor down in Florida, and I have no idea what these guys did. I'd never seen them on TV because I didn't watch it anymore. But I mean, it didn't matter. It was easy, but I quit watching it. So mid 90s.
So being a wrestler, it can be hard, it can be tough, it's a grind, you're used to the schedule. Once you stop, you retire, start doing other things. Uh, it's different, it's a different feeling, you have more free time, have more opportunities to do things that you didn't get a chance to do before, including becoming a baseball coach. Let's talk about what made you decide to get involved with coaching.
My kid was really good. Yeah, at 8 years old, he was playing on three teams, one travel team, two local leagues. And so we were playing every night, almost every weekend. And from his third year, from not 10 years old on, we played 100 games a year. I mean, so we were on the road. I was on the road just as much for that as we had been when I was wrestling.
Was
And we
there,
had, we had traveling teams. So, I mean, all the kids were going to play high school ball. A lot of them played college ball. Uh, we had scouts at the games as the kids got older. Uh,
so your son he inspired you to become a coach?
oh no, I so inspired. I was always a baseball fan growing up.
Hmm.
I just wasn't as good as my kid.
Who was like your ultimate favorite baseball
I
player?
was a Dodger fan back in the day when Garvey, Say, Lopes, and Russell was the infield. Sandy Koufax, those are Don Sutton. I was a big Dodger fan back in the day.
And your son, uh, he went to school, he got,
He played college baseball in Florida in their junior college thing, which is basically minor league. And he ended up actually leading the conference in hitting as a freshman.
hmm.
Unfortunately, he got into drugs and stuff and alcohol, and that kind of ended his baseball career.
When you're coaching these kids, because they need a figure to look up to, role model to look up to, during their season, during their time. What kind of pieces of advice did you give to them that really motivated them?
You got to have the right kids. You have to have parents who buy into it because, like I said, we were on the road every weekend from end of April until end of July, and we never stopped. And we only had a 12-man team, so if more than one kid would take off for a weekend, we didn't have enough kids to play. So, and we had really good parents.
What was your favorite part about coaching?
I don't know, winning, having the scouts come and watch the kids. I mean, our team was so. I don't know if you watch any youth baseball, but the kids have all their chants and cheers. My kids didn't. My kids, it was like they were there to play baseball, not to sit on the bench and chant, and they were just there to play.
Any memorable games that you
Yeah,
remember?
we went to Cooperstown. They have a youth baseball tournament there, and even at 12 years old, it's the first time that the kids are stealing because none of the local leagues had stealing, and it was actually the first time. And we went there and went 12-0 and won the whole tournament. We won it at 3 in the morning on the last day. So I mean that was probably the highlight of all of it.
what is it about giving back or paying it forward to the next generation that gives you the most joy?
Well, I still enjoy. There's a local wrestling camp in Milwaukee. Frank DeFalco runs it. He's got Bruce City Wrestling, and I once a month I might go down to his camp and help train the young guys. Uh, I still enjoy doing that, even though what they're doing is not what we did. But I still know what I would do today if I was wrestling. So
Are there things that in your era that you wish would still be applied today as far as the
yeah,
wrestling
the
businesses go?
psychology of it. I think. I mean, I watch some of the stuff where they do bloopers on the internet where guys jump off the ceiling, and that's not wrestling. I'm sorry. I watch them with. They bring chairs out from under the ring with barbed wire wrapped on them, and that's not wrestling.
When you're assisting at the wrestling club, what are some things that you tell your students?
I just show them things that they're not being taught. I don't agree with a lot of what they're teaching today, but like when you watch the kids today take an arm drag, most of them just put their arm out in the midair and let the other guy grab their arm. That's not the right way to do an arm drag. The right way to do an arm drag is for me to grab your neck and then you go down, because why would I turn around and hand you my arm? The whole deal is when I turn around, I see your neck, I'm going to grab you. And that was something I learned 50 years ago. So it's little things that they don't get. You don't need you don't need to do the next biggest move. You need to get the people to buy what you're doing.
Do you keep in touch with any of the people that have graduated or have come out of the school?
No. I might go watch one of their matches. There's one kid there. His name is Roosevelt. I kind of am his mentor. I'd go in to watch some of his matches and I'll critique them. But back in the day, I had my own school, and my guys all my guys were all way better wrestlers than what they got at the camp today. Of course, today they'll take a kid who's 130 pounds. We didn't do that.
When you talk to Roosevelt, anything that motivates him? Is there stuff that you can share with me or care to share pieces of
Yeah,
advice?
yeah. I think the biggest thing I'm trying to get him to do, and he did it once and it worked out real good. When the matches end, if I'm wrestling you today and let's say you beat me, right? Nowadays, both guys just get up and go back to the dressing room. Well, I'm trying to teach him, Roosevelt, to keep his heat so he can lose. I could lose to you. And when you got on the floor, if you got to the floor, I'd spit at you, call you a coward. I'd make you come back in the ring. If you were still in the ring, I'd hit you from behind and tell you don't sell it. And then when you turned around to hit me, I can bail out of the ring, say screw you, and they forgot that you beat me. Now they want to see me still want to see you kick my ass for spitting at you or for hitting you. And nobody does that today. So if you're wrestling the same club, and Frank's place runs one of the same clubs every month. Well, if you've been beaten 3 times in a row at that club, what good are you? But nobody does that. The matches just end and everyone just goes back to the dressing room. That would never have happened in our day because you had to keep your heat. I could wrestle Buck Zumhofe or Brad Riggins every month, every time in Milwaukee for a year and keep my heat, and the people would still buy the match.
And how long did you have your wrestling school for?
Probably 10 years.
Anybody notable graduates went on
Texas,
to do big things?
Texas Hangman. They ended up getting the tag straps for Lawler, and they had the tag straps in Puerto Rico. And Mike and Tom ended up working in for WCW as Tough Tom, and Mean Mike. They got tryouts for New York. They did Japan. And most of the guys I trained didn't really want to go on the road. We had our local stuff, and we worked. We had local things going on all the time.
When you see these people, go on to do bigger things, I mean, it has to feel good knowing that you played a big part in their development.
You really, whatever you get in the wrestling business, you get on your own. I don't think anyone gets it for you. Yeah, I showed them a headlock, and I showed them the rest of it. Then I taught them how to call a match and the steps of a match. But other than that, they had to learn on their own. That's the other thing with today's kids. If me and you are driving to a town today and we're working on the show, the minute we get in the car, you're on your cell phone texting. In our day, when we drove from Milwaukee to Kansas City to do television, and we spent 12 hours in the car, we spent most of that 12 hours talking about wrestling. They don't do that today. When I drove up and down the roads in Louisiana and I was trying to learn the business, I drive with Stephen Little Bear. I drive with the guys that we're driving with. We could sit and talk wrestling and learn. They don't do that today.
It's a different time, different era. Well, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find more about you on social media if they want to get in touch with you?
They can't. I mean, they can find me on Facebook, but if any of your if any of the people want to read my book, I wrote a book and it was on Amazon. It's not anymore. If they'd like to read a copy of it, if they send you their email address and you send it to me, I'll forward them a PDF copy free
All
of.
right. All right. Well, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
But can I tell you one? Can I tell your people one good story
Sure.
before we leave? I'm I traveled a lot in Louisiana with Junkyard Dog. And one night we were coming back through Chula, Mississippi. And naturally, he knew the town. So he took us to a 7-Eleven in a part of town that people with my skin tone don't go to. This is 1980 in the deep South. And he said, go in and get us some stuff to drink. So I went in to get him a beer and I went in to get myself a soda. And I turned around and there were 6 or 7 fairly large black guys surrounding me. And he waited just long enough, knowing what was going to happen, before he waltzed in and put his arm around me and saved the day because he was the biggest star in the Mid South territory. And unfortunately, he had to ride back 100 miles with the smell of shit coming out of my clothes. I'm kidding. I really didn't, but that was scary for a minute till he waltzed in.
Yeah. Well, he helped you.
That's the kind of stuff that nobody knew what was going on, and we were all. It was a rip, kind of like me thinking you should pay me for this. You know,
Yeah. Yep.
he was a
Well,
great guy. He was a great guy, gone way too soon.
yes. Another legend we lost. Well, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Let me know when. I'll be happy to do it.
Absolutely. Take care.
Okay, you too. Have a good
Bye-bye.
evening.
You too. Bye-bye. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.